Oh, you can start right now. Go ahead.
Good afternoon and welcome to our December Empowered Community Employee Town Hall here at Bloom Energy, where we have a chance to engage and interact with key policymakers and our CEO and founder and board chair, Dr. KR Sridhar. Today, we are honored to have as our special guest the assemblyman who represents the Pasadena area in Southern California. But due to his important role as chair of the Utilities and Energy Committee in the California State Assembly, he truly represents every community in our state, and that is the Assemblyman Chris Holden. KR Sridhar, Chris Holden, we want to thank you for participating today in our Empowered Communities Employee Town Hall. We are going to start in just a moment as people enter into today's discussion. I would like to mention, of course, that our employee town hall are divided into three distinct parts. The first is I get to ask two incredibly intelligent, articulate leaders 5 or 6 questions, which we will rotate back and forth so no one feels like I picked on them the whole time. And then second is what we call our lightning round. 6 or 7 quick questions with 1 word to 1 sentence responses and no run-on sentences in those responses. And then finally, my favorite part is engaging the incredible people who work here at Bloom Energy across our state and across our country for their questions live, either in the chat box or by voice. We promise, as always, to end on time at 1 p.m. so that you can all get back to your busy day. With that, we're going to go ahead and get started. I want to thank my colleague, Manal Shafi, for her work in preparing for today's Employee Town Hall with our communications team as well. And we have asked Manal Shafi to please introduce our special guest. Manal?
Thank you, Carl. It is my pleasure to introduce Assembly Member Chris Holden. First elected in 2012, Assembly Member Holden represents California's 41st Assembly District, which includes the communities of Pasadena, Altadena, Sierra Madre, Monrovia, San Dimas, Claremont, and Rancho Cucamonga. He currently serves as chair of the Utilities and Energy Committee. His legislative priorities include social justice, transportation, and education, and he's a strong supporter of legislation that grows our economy, protects our environment, and strengthens our infrastructure and supports working families. In 2020, his legislation, he passed legislation that requires diversity on corporate boards in California called AB 979, which was signed into law. Prior to serving as an assembly member, he served as president of the Burbank-Glendale Pasadena Airport Authority, as a Pasadena City Council member for 23 years, and as mayor of Pasadena in 1997. And without further ado, please join me in giving a warm welcome to Assembly Member Chris Holden.
Thank you.
Manal Shafi, thank you for all your work preparing today, as well as that introduction of our special guest. Again, we are in 3 segments today. The first is questions to Assemblymember Chris Holden and our founder, CEO, and chairman, Dr. KR Sridhar. And Dr. Sridhar, we're going to start with you. KR and Assemblymember Holden, you have both stated that reliable power is essential to our economy and our quality of life. What are some of the biggest risks associated with an unreliable power system, and what can we do to mitigate those risks? KR, we're going to start with you, then Assemblymember Holden.
Thank you, Carl and Assemblymember Holden. It's a pleasure to have you as our special guest today. It's a privilege. We know how long you've been thinking about the issues of energy and energy security and energy justice for the people of California. So welcome to the company. I'd like to answer Carl's question here. Look, energy today, even compared to 25 years ago, is more an essential human need than it was 25 years ago. Think about the number of things that you depend on electricity today that you really didn't have to depend upon 25 years ago. the first thing that should come to your mind is this meeting we are having right now. If Congressman Holden didn't have electricity in his house, he wouldn't be zooming into us. That's something that didn't happen. So every little thing from work from home, driverless cars at some point in time, to hospital records being accessed should your allowed one need medical care instantly. Those things don't happen because digital runs on electricity. We are in a digital world. Most of us cannot escape from an imminent danger if our electric cars could not charge when the city puts out an evacuation alert. So the need for resilient power that's always on is essential. You put that against the context of poles and wires are bringing electricity to us. No matter what we do in strengthening them, it's a single line failure. So we need diversity of sources and diversity of ways that that power can get into your critical infrastructure so human life can be kept safe, property can be protected. There is no way the one size fits all 19th century electric grid alone with any amount of upgrade can deal with the resiliency reliability issue. Reliability simply says you need multiple ways of being able to achieve the same thing. And there's a failback option rather than failing. So we need failback options.
KR Sridhar, thank you. Assembly Member Chris Holden, same question to you. How do we mitigate those risks?
Well, I appreciate the question, Carl. And let me just first thank you and KR for the invitation to join you today. And it's an honor to be able to speak not only to you, but to your employees of Bloom. I've had an opportunity to be affiliated with your company for a while now. So I'm very appreciative of the good work that your company is doing and the being a part of this collaborative to move us forward into a cleaner future. First of all, let's just fundamentals. Keeping the lights on is clearly the fundamental element to energy policy. People don't like it when the lights go off, and nor should they. It's disruptive to our lives and our economy, and has obviously caused damage to infrastructure and danger to those with medical needs and other emergencies. You know, we're challenged in recent years in two ways. First, the planned outages of the utilities as a defense to wildfire threats. We also saw a threat to reliability a year ago when we ran short on electricity during the evening peak for 2 evenings. The utilities have made tremendous progress in reducing the scope of unplanned outages. PG&E, as an example, went from more than 2 million affected customers 2 years ago to 22,000 this year during their PSPS events. And we'll continue to see more of those drops in recent years to come. On the reliability front, to the convergence of several events, and with improved planning, particularly for heat storms, we're shoring up procurement, especially with storage to manage the evening ramp. And as we all know, we're battling with climate change, and it has had us behind the curve on occasion. Sometimes we tried to get ahead of the curve. But last year, the governor proclaimed, and we agree wholeheartedly, no more blackouts. And so as a result, it was imperative that the energy agencies come together to work together to try to make sure that they're planning and coordinating efficiently. Those that are the planners, the CEC, and those with the procurement opportunities with the California Independent System Operator, and also the PUC are collaborating and working as a team. Regionalization is a concept that has been around for a while, and one that we memorialized in legislation back in 2017. When we're talking about reliability and we're talking about stability to our grid, we need to be able to be more efficient. And efficiency also comes from working with the 14 other Western states. Now, back in 2017, it was a little bit more challenging. We had a hostile federal administration that was still looking at subsidizing fossil fuel. We had other states that we were relying on to be part of this regionalized program that we're still dabbling in coal and other related fossil fuel products. And that, along with how do we structure the governance, how do we work collaboratively with our ISO to make sure that we don't lose control. And so the legislature was still doing with a lot of news or new issues around this particular area. But since then, we've seen the growth of these other states to start to move away from fossil fuel, to be more aggressive in their clean, renewable future and looking at zero carbon by roughly the same time as California. So they started to look like California. They started to embrace the policies that we care about. The federal government administration has changed. FERC is more friendly to looking at a regionalized effort in the 14 Western states. And what that does is in terms of benefits Californians, because it allows for us to be exporters of power. So when we're producing more solar, it gives us an opportunity to, so we're not curtailing it, to send it out to other states and create benefit. And when the sun is not shining in our state and it is in another, we can import, as well as hydro from the Pacific Northwest. So efficiency, I think, is going to be very much a part of it, but it also is one of the few approaches that actually looks at reducing the cost to ratepayers. And so as we become more efficient and more reliable in our grid operation, and it becomes greener, these are all going to be critical as we look forward to moving forward in terms of having a more reliable, stable grid going forward. And so we're thinking about bringing that forward again for conversation this year, and we'll hope that you'll be a part of that conversation.
Chairman Holden, thank you for that excellent response. And we're going to stay with you since your vocal cords are all warmed up now. Assemblyman Holden, you were a lead author of Assembly Bill 617, which aims to improve air quality in communities that are disproportionately affected by exposure to localized air pollutants. And we all know that, regrettably, California has relied way too much on diesel generators as backup fuel sources, which are terrible both in terms of localized air pollutants, but also greenhouse gas emissions. Recognizing this disparity, Bloom has made improving air quality, including in vulnerable communities, a key component of its sustainability goals. How can implementing clean energy solutions address inequities faced by too many California communities that are currently underserved? Thanks again for your leadership on 617, but starting with you, how can we do even more?
Well, first of all, I appreciate the question, and I do appreciate the status of lead author, although my colleague, Cristina Garcia, was essentially the lead author on this particular bill. I was a joint author, but so happy to be able to support her and to work collaboratively with her on it. The Community Air Protection Program, or the CAP program, is indeed focused on reducing exposure to those communities most impacted by air pollution, and is having transformational impact in areas like Oakland and the San Joaquin Valley, both of which are heavily impacted by transportation emissions. The primary intent of this bill was to establish strong localized air quality monitoring to locate and target industrial and mobile sources of air pollution. It's clear that unless and until we target and transform those sources, emission from transportation, especially diesel and gas plants and industrial facilities, we can't improve the quality of life for those communities that are most impacted. Electrification of transportation with a focus on medium and heavy duty vehicles is particularly critical. And with AB 617, we're looking to the air quality management districts to enforce and provide compliance. But I think that until you get those heavy polluters that are stationary, we are tilting at windmills. And so we need to, this bill is so important in what it's designed to do to ensure that those companies, those businesses that are out there that are stationary, that are creating havoc in a lot of these communities by polluting the air, this bill is going to go a long way to making sure we can identify them, identify the kind of pollution they're putting out, and ensure that there's enforcement and compliance to shutting them down if necessary.
Chairman Holden, thank you. As we go to Dr. KR Sridhar, if you've just joined us, welcome to our Bloom Energy Empowered Communities Employee Town Hall with State Assemblyman Chris Holden, the chair of the Utilities and Energy Committee, and of course, our CEO KR Sridhar. KR, same question, localized clean air.
Thank you. So first and foremost, like you did, Carl, Chairman Holden, thank you for your leadership on AB 617. I think it's a great step towards making sure the underserved communities are breathing clean air. It is even more important today that we do that because COVID has disproportionately impacted the underserved community, and a person with a compromised respiratory system should not be subject to those kind of air pollution. So we applaud you for taking that step. Having said that, I think there is a lot more that we should be doing. If I just take our neighboring town here to San Jose of Santa Clara, the city of Santa Clara sought permission and got approval from the California Energy Commission for over 250 megawatts worth of diesel genset backup. Just this last year. And we ran in the evenings diesel gensets all over the state, up and down the state, to protect from blackouts happening in the state. And these diesel gensets are typically located in fenced communities. This is where they are. This doesn't have to be that way. There are technologies like what we bring to the table, not just ours, but so many other technologies that can eliminate dirty diesel. And as a state, while we are looking at the RPS standards, we have relied more, not less, compared to 15 years ago on dirty backup diesel. This is wrong.
KR, thanks for raising that. In that city that you stated, 250 megawatts, that's a city of only 132,000 people. To put into context how much dirty diesel has been placed in that city as a backup source of energy. Let's move on to climate change, as we're trending in that direction anyway, and I know it's a passion that you both share. Climate change has and will continue to have significant implications for our public health and safety, ecosystems, and economic well-being. This means that we all have a responsibility to become better stewards of our environment. On an individual level, what are some changes that you have made in your daily lives to reduce your ecological footprint? KR, we're going to start with you this time and then move to Chairman Holden.
Since I just finished lunch and most of you are probably eating lunch as you're listening to us, I think the one place that I am glad I'm making an impact, and this is not, I'm not telling others to do something or not do something. These are all individual decisions, but I feel very good that I was brought up as a young kid as a vegetarian, so I don't know what meat tastes like and I don't miss it. And I think that has a huge impact on my own personal carbon footprint.
Okay, you put me to shame. I'm gonna.
That's why I prefaced it. I'm not saying you do that or you don't do that. I'm just, you asked me for one, I gave you one.
Thank you.
No value judgment. No value judgment here.
Well, that's when people tell me I'm full of baloney. They were talking about what I was eating and not what I'm espousing. Assembly Member Chris Holden.
Well, like you, Carl, I can't rise to that standard, but I do appreciate those who do. And, you know, I do love an eggplant dish every now and then. So I kind of go in and out from on occasion, but sort of kind of in a different way. You know, we are big recyclers here in our home, you know, in this community, and like in all communities with the drought, especially in Southern California, we have to pay special attention to how much water we're using, when to use it. And so with at one point having 5 kids in the house, you know, and 2 adults, the showers were obviously, we were using a lot of water in showers, but we've cut back significantly since they've moved out. We've gone with more of a zero-scape, introducing a zero-scape landscaping into around our home, so to try to address the use of water there. And we have solar panels on our roof. So That's kind of the contribution. I would do more. As soon as they have EVs that I can fit in, I'll go in that direction too.
And since we're on Zoom, I'm not sure all of our Bloom Energy colleagues can appreciate that last comment, but Assembly Member Chris Holden is rather tall. We don't just look up, we don't just look up to him because of his leadership, but also his height. He's 6'8" and had actually passed up an opportunity to play professional basketball to pursue public service. And we're all the better that you did that.
Could I say this? Because I love the way you said that. It makes me seem really noble. But I did have a chance to play European, went back to school, finished up. By the time I was going back, the door had closed. And then at that point, I turned to public service. But I like the way you said it better.
And I like what you mentioned about showers. My solution, by the way, I stopped showering completely 3 months ago. And now it looks like I've lost weight because people stand further away from me and I look thinner because of that. Okay, we're moving on quickly. We're going to question 4 with our honored guests, Assembly Member Chris Holden and Dr. KR Sridhar, our CEO and chair here at Bloom Energy. If you've just joined our employee town hall, Empowered Communities. Assembly Member Holden, we're going to start with you with question 4. You jointly authored Assembly Bill 979, which requires publicly held corporations headquartered here in the Golden State to have at least one director from an underrepresented community by the end of 2021. Assembly Member and KR, in your opinion, what is the most important outcome of increased diversity on corporate leadership boards and positions? And we're going to start with Assembly Member Holden.
Thank you. First of all, let me just say thank you to Bloom Energy for your being right there on the point on this discussion in 2020. It was really an important time, as we all know, that the social justice issues were happening. There was a lot of conversation about racial tensions. And so we had this conversation probably 5 or 6 years prior. So this was really a time that we recognized to sort of bring it back and to have it front and center. And again, Bloom was right there with us arm in arm. So I do appreciate that. And I will say that in California, we've had a number of companies that have been in compliance with 979 even before it actually went into law. But I've always said that, quite frankly, AB 979 represents the floor, not the ceiling. And we're seeing that. The Silicon Valley Leadership Group has gone beyond the bill's requirements, pledging to fill 25% of executive positions with hires from underrepresented groups by 2025. That's a huge deal. So when we say, what has the bill done? It's really sort of activated and focused in a way that I think has been really transformational. Nationally, the bill inspired action when NASDAQ successfully changed its rules to require its member companies to have at least one woman or person of color on their board of directors. Consequently, other evidence of national change is transparency. Among SP 500 and Russell 3000 companies, their disclosure of board diversity data has doubled. This increased disclosure of diversity statistics creates more accountability and national corporate culture that values diversity. And I think that's one of the most important parts of this, is that when the leadership at the top believes this is important, then it transcends through the culture of the entire company. And that is what's evident at Bloom. As far as direct impact, we've seen the number of California corporate boards without any ethnic diversity decrease by 2.9% this year alone. But as I said, we're just getting started. And notwithstanding lawsuits that are out there challenging this legislation, we still see it ramping up. And at the end of the day, the studies that show that by having diversity in the corporate boardroom actually helps the bottom line. And who in corporate America or just across the board would have a problem with that? So we see the change happening. California is a majority minority state, as will the country be in 2045. And so these are the types of institutional changes that are so critical. And there's diversity, the diversity that's brought to the corporate environment only helps the company in so many different ways in terms of better penetrating into the markets, but also, as I said, affecting in a very positive way the bottom line.
Assembly Member Holden, thank you for your commitment and leadership on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Dr. Sridhar, same question to you. Why were you personally and Bloom corporately so enthusiastic about the adoption of Assembly Bill 979? And why is that important?
Well, first and foremost, again, with Assembly Bill 979, Chairman Holden, you keep displaying again and again why you're this amazing leader that everybody looks up to. So thank you, sir. Thank you for doing it. So we are honored to have you as our leader in Sacramento. So let me start with that. Look, from our perspective at Bloom, this is a downright brain dead simple thing to do, is that when you have diversity of opinion in any room that you're participating in, the level of conversation, the level of engagement, and the kind of outcome that's going to come out of that is always going to be better than a bunch of people who think the same way. Where we come from, the world experiences, the knowledge that we bring from that is not going to be the same if we all come from the same place. And America is not one same place. So having representation that is diverse, providing a platform where those diverse opinions are being freely expressed, including the ones that make sense to make decisions, is essential if you want to be a good business that always wants to do the right thing. So for us, when we saw this bill, we were already doing it. We already wanted to continue doing it. And it was sometimes markets and market forces alone will not do the right thing without there being some kind of a regulatory stick. We've seen that in so many areas. This was a nudge, a stick. I think Chairman Holden would agree with me. The day we don't need this bill is a good day because everybody is doing it.
Correct. Agree.
Dr. Sridhar, thank you for weighing in as well. And I just want to call out and thank our Chief People Officer and Executive Vice President, Sonia Wilkerson, for her commitment, not only to board diversity on our executive team, diversity throughout our organization throughout the United States. Our final question before we go to our lightning round to Dr. Sridhar and Assembly Member Holden. You are both highly accomplished individuals who have made a positive and far-reaching impact through your respective professions and personal lives. When it comes to either professional or personal, I'm going to put you on the spot to stop being so humble for just a moment. What is a recent accomplishment for which you are most proud? KR, we're going to start with you. Professional or personal?
Yes. Okay, I'm going to take something that happened very, very recently at Bloom, but things have moved so fast in some ways that it almost seems like a long time. But very early on, when vaccines came along, we were one of the first companies to say, if you're not vaccinated, you don't come into work. This was way before the state took a position, before Santa Clara took a position, or any of the large corporations took a position. I think we were the first ones to say, there's a zero tolerance rule to this. This is because we want to be protective of our workforce. Science and data points to where it is. And very clearly, this is what we're going to do to create a safe workplace. A lot of people challenged me on it because it was very early. I was I was one of the first ones to say this. How would employees react? How would other people react? Is this legal? Are we going to get challenged for it? I said, maybe to all of the above, but we will still do the right thing. If you're challenged in court, we'll take it along because we're doing the right thing. So I feel very proud about that decision. And in hindsight, I feel a little vindicated with more and more people adopting it in much larger settings.
KR, thank you for mentioning that. Could you take a moment and just also share your leadership, the company's leadership on rapid testing and how that has benefited the community as well?
Yeah, so Chairman Holden, and for those of you employees who may not be familiar with this, many of you, it was very early in the COVID fight. It was 3 to 4 days before you could get a test done and the results given to you because there were very few testing sites, even here in California, where we wanted to do a lot more. We were an essential business doing, staying on every single day in our manufacturing floor. And I felt extremely uncomfortable that in spite of all the safety measures and the social distancing, everything we did, our employees would come and get a test and not know for another 4 days whether they're positive or not, and how many people would they have contacted and done what they did. So luckily, my alma mater, University of Illinois, had a rapid test that they had come up with, which within 5 hours you could figure out what was going on. I said, I need one of those tests here in the Valley. They said, well, if you can figure out how to create about $1 million, we can put all that lab in a trailer and send it to you, but you're going to need about 10,000 tests a day to make it viable. So we as a company, Carl, with your leadership and a few others in the company, we went and offered this test to a lot of companies around us. While people were charging $100 and giving them results in 3 to 4 days, we were charging them $30 and giving the results back in 4 to 5 hours, including all our employees. And of course, we paid for it as a company. But then we added a $5 kicker to it, very transparently, saying we're going to charge $35 instead of $30. And that extra $5 is going to test people in the underserved community who can't afford it. So I think we have done, Carl, somewhere in the neighborhood of $750,000 to $1 million worth of community donations.
Including a mobile vaccination unit that has provided vaccines for thousands and thousands of people in our underserved communities. Thanks to your leadership, Dr. Sridhar. Thank you. Assembly Member Chris Holden, same question. We're going to put you on the spot to not be humble for a moment. Something recently, personally or professionally, that you're proud of. Oh, you're on mute, sir.
Sorry about that. I think I would say that what I'm professionally and personally proud of at the same time was legislation that we put forward in 2020. As we saw sort of the social unrest, as I mentioned earlier, sort of start galvanizing not only around the country, but around the world at the killing of George Floyd and the officers who basically stood and watched. And then the peaceful protests that ensued and the call for change. And I started to think, well, what can I do to help address this issue? What is it that we in California can take a proactive position around it? Now, California, like Minnesota, has a duty to intervene law, but the difference is between both of them, what's missing is to make sure that there are clean and clear parameters on when and under what conditions to intervene. So officers can say, well, I didn't intervene because of one reason or another. And I think it's also important to note that this important bill that we put forward in 20 and then had to actually bring back in 2021 because there was a lot of opposition from law enforcement, and I can understand there was some concern. But what we were trying to do was put in place some mechanisms where the public trust could be restored, because we need law enforcement. And I think that, I have family members who are in law enforcement, but at the same time, we were at a flashpoint, and we needed to recognize what was happening in a way that would put our officers in a stronger position to be able to step in at the appropriate time and make sure that an excessive use of force against someone from the public was being interfered with, that the proper law enforcement techniques needed to be trained. And so with AB 26, which was the bill that came out of the first bill that we had to hold, or we didn't have to hold, but was held in the 2020 session, was designed to create clarity. And so AB 26, in trying to create that clarity, used certain techniques that would determine when intervention was necessary. The use of de-escalation techniques, confronting an officer applying excessive use of force, not just standing there watching, physically stopping the excessive use of force when in a position to do so. All of these things needed to be trained to know when to do it, when not to do it, but to have it clear what the principles would be. Recording and documenting an incident in real time, using the body camera, reporting an incident to dispatch or the watch commander in real time. All important techniques, but it also went further in addressing other elements of the law that weren't clear, requiring peace officers to report the incident immediately to their supervisor, prohibiting retaliation on a peace officer for reporting the incident. We were hearing a lot about inside the department how there's pressures on officers that are trying to do the right thing. Prohibits an officer from training other officers for a period of at least 3 years from the date of a excessive use of force complaint was substantiated. And also requires an officer who fails to intervene to be disciplined up to and including the same level of punishment as the offending officer. So I'm proud of that, because I think what we were trying to do is what Washington was trying to do, but wasn't able to do. We were able to meet sort of the concerns and frustrations of a public that had reached sort of a breaking point. We tried to be fair in doing that so that law enforcement and the officers' due process was respected in this process. But at the same time, we had to start taking some affirmative steps for reform so that the public could start to rebuild their trust. And I remember growing up, my mom would always say when we were little, she said, if you get lost in the store, you look for a police officer. So there's always been sort of this understanding of the value and importance of law enforcement. And so I'm just proud of the fact that in the midst of that tension that was so paramount in 20 and carried into 21, that California was able to do something. And as much as we wanted Washington to step in, they still have not. So at least we were able in our state to take some affirmative action, which I think was fair. And at the end of the day, we had more law enforcement agencies supporting the bill than opposing the bill. So we're also about building consensus in our policy making, and I'm proud about that as well.
Assembly Member Holden, I'm just humbled by your leadership 2 years in a row to move that through, to help people throughout our state go from feeling hopeless to hopeful that these reforms could make a meaningful impact and literally save lives. So thank you again. We are going to move now to segment 2 of our Empowered Communities Employee Town Hall, and that is our lightning round. 8 quick questions with 1 word to 1 sentence responses. I will rotate back and forth. We'll start with Assembly Member Chris Holden. First lightning round question: what is your favorite outdoor activity?
Hiking.
Dr. KR Sridhar.
Skiing.
Skiing. Okay, good. Well, if you hike up the mountain, you can ski down together. KR, what was your first paying job?
I was part-time operating a pilot nuclear power plant. That was my first job.
Okay, that kind of outdoes my dishwasher job. Assembly
That was
member,
my first dream job.
Assembly Member Chris Holden.
Lord, I feel like such an underachiever. Parking lot attendant.
Excellent.
Met a lot of people in that process, though.
Yes. Chris Holden, if you had 1 free hour a day, how would you invest it?
Being quiet.
KR.
Spending it with friends and family.
KR, our next lightning round question. Who was your favorite teacher or professor? And in 1 sentence, why?
He was my PhD advisor because he taught me the importance of rigorousness and told me there's always enough time to do a lousy job, but that's not what I'm expecting.
Excellent. Chris Holden.
My basketball coach in high school, George Turgeon, he taught me more than just to be a really good basketball player, but also a good student and a good person.
Excellent. Great lessons for life. Assemblyman Holden, what do you value most about the holiday season?
A time of year for people to come together. And all too often we spend most of the time apart. And so it gives us a chance to hopefully see the best in each other and start to live that out.
Great.
KR Sridhar, same question.
The holiday season helps you value time and reflect. The next holiday season means 1 more year has passed by. It makes you reflect on what have you done, and it makes you reflect about what are you going to do.
Yes, well said. We have 3 more lightning round questions, and it's this part of our Empowered Communities Employee Town Hall that I would remind my colleagues at Bloom Energy, whether you would like to ask a question to either or both of our guests, you can put that into the chat box and we will read as many as possible, or you can, with the help of our communications team, come off of mute, I assume by raising your hand, to ask a question orally. But please start filling the chat box with your questions, as well as getting ready to ask them orally if that is your preference. So go ahead and turn on your chat box feature and we'll get to as many of those as possible. Our next lightning round question goes to KR Sridhar. What is 1 item that you still have to achieve on your bucket list?
Is it Antarctica?
I'm sorry, one more time?
Is it Antarctica?
Oh my goodness. Okay, good. And I understand they need some Bloom fuel cells there too. So we'll send you off there. Assembly Member Chris Holden.
Well, I'm not sure that counts. That sounds like a little bit of work involved on that trip. I probably learning to play golf. I will say that because first of all, I don't really have a bucket list, so I'm sort of at behind the 8 ball on this one a little bit, but everyone tells me I should play because I have the right kind of, I guess, stature and torque. I just, when I do things, I like to be able to put a lot of time into it and really get good at it. And I think that that's why it's still on the bucket list, because I just haven't had time to get good at it. But that's one that I think I'll tackle at some point soon.
Excellent. Chris Holden, we're coming right back to you. What is the most courageous thing you have ever done?
That's a tough one, because when I think of courage, I think of someone giving up an organ to save someone else's life, running into a building that's on fire to save. I mean, I think of it in different ways. So I'm going to sort of answer this question from the standpoint of courage and conviction. So I would say that when I have to take tough positions that I know are right, but are not popular.
Excellent. Thank you. KR Sridhar?
I agree with the chairman. Depends on which aspect of courage you look at. So in this case, I'll take one particular aspect of overcoming your inner fear. to do something and show courage. And here, like a couple of years ago, I'm not a swimmer, and on the beach, my young teenage daughter challenged me to put on a life jacket and try surfing with her in the ocean. So somebody who doesn't know how to swim, I went and did that because she said, "Dad, you always push us to do uncomfortable things." And so that was one of overcoming inner fear.
Wow. What a great example of overcoming fear for your children to see as well. And our last lightning round question. What is one important trait that you think everyone should have? KR Sridhar?
The one important skill I think everyone should have is to be able to see in another person they're interacting with the good they have in them. It's always a basis for building a relationship.
Excellent. Excellent. Chris Holden.
Similar kindness.
Outstanding. Thank you both. Mine would be a positive spirit, but I think they are all similar in that way. We now move on to my favorite segment, where people have already been texting me directly questions that they would like to pose to Assembly Member Chris Holden and our CEO and founder, KR Sridhar. You can also put those easily right into the chat box, or you can raise your hand, take yourself off of mute, and ask your question directly. And we'll get to as many of these as we possibly can before our wrap-up remarks from our special guests and two of our internal leaders. I've already had several that were texted to my cell phone, so let me start and get to as many of these as possible. One is about the tone and tenor of our federal dialogue. And the question is to Assembly Member Chris Holden, as well as to our CEO KR Sridhar. What would you recommend we do to set a better tone of the discussion in Washington, D.C. to bring people together rather than drive them apart? Any advice for our federal leaders? We'll start with Chris Holden.
Wow, well, it's a really good question. It's one I think we all wrestle with every day. I think that clearly a lot of what we see with our elected officials is sort of mirroring what they believe their constituents want them to do and how they want them to think and how they want to see them have themselves in these elected positions. And so I think it's really incumbent upon us all to make sure that we hold our elected officials accountable, not just for being policy focused on the things that we can fall into one camp or the other on, but just being civil. This is still a democracy. It's still an environment where we need everyone to work collaboratively. And there was once upon a time, a concept called collaboration and working together to make sure that we're getting good policy and being willing to compromise. Compromise has become a bad word, I think, and to understand that we are a society of a lot of different points of views. And I think that until we get to the place where we're not fighting for who controls Congress, but how we put people in who can utilize the institution in a way that benefits all of the people in this country and sets a good example around the world. And I think that comes from the boss, and the bosses are the people. Otherwise it's the tail wagging the dog. Our expectations are in the wrong place. We have to look at each other, and we have to make sure we hold accountable those that we send to do a job that is a very noble and big job. And my best shot at it.
Well said, Assemblyman Holden. KR?
So I think California being the largest state, very clearly we can set the example. And for us to show, and we have tremendous leaders in Sacramento, for us to show how representative democracy works as opposed to populist democracy. Doing the right thing, because we elect our leaders and we send them there to really understand all sides of an issue and make those tough decisions that Chairman Holden talked about, and then to be able to explain to your people why that was the right decision for their good. That's very different from populist democracy of polling and figuring out what is it that you want to hear from me, and that's what I'm going to tell you. So I think we need that displayed in spades here in the state, and show how that works and translate that to the country, which is what seems to be missing these days compared to what it used to be.
I'm going to try to get to at least two more of these questions that have come in. We'll do the best we can. The next one is around national policy, and it reads that the US Senate currently is spending the next week or two finalizing the reconciliation bill, which includes more than $500 million for clean, resilient energy solutions. Do you believe they will be successful? And what do you see as the key elements important for that bill, for our nation and our world? KR, we're going to start with you on this one.
I only predict the future when I'm inventing it. Otherwise, so look, I think the bill is needed. We need a bold bill that transforms our country and positions us as leaders for the next century. And this bill can help us. It is also a bill from a very long time that is going to be inclusive and take care of the people who have been left behind. So for those reasons, I think this is a bill that we need. And there is plenty of provisions in there to fight climate change, which then translated makes it an economic opportunity as opposed to just fighting a disaster.
Well said. KR, thank you. Assembly Member Holden.
Yeah, I think I agree. It is transformative legislation that has sort of come from nearly $3 trillion down to cut in half, if not less than that. And what is in it is covers a wide range of areas. And we do see the infrastructure bill having at least been moving. That is happening. That is going to bring resources to the state to address infrastructure needs, roads and highways, transportation systems, climate change related issues. And so I think that we're going to still see some major investment in terms of how we can use it in California and how hungry we are for the resources and projects we have ready to implement, including water projects that we didn't really talk too much about, but certainly water infrastructure is critical when you're in Southern California, especially, but a state like California where a drought continues to plague us. But yeah, I just think that the kind of human infrastructure that the Build Back Better bill is going to bring is going to help people. And look, if we're not about taking care of our people, then I don't know what we're about. So whether super progressive or super conservative, again, it comes back to, whatever state you represent, you have poor people, you have rich, you have middle income people. These bills are designed to help all of these people at all of the different levels of their existence and to make quality of life better, especially for those who are on the outside. The hard part for me is understanding why they vote forward on beyond now. And so here's hoping that here in times to come, that we'll see in recent weeks or weeks to come, the bill move because it needs to.
It would be a nice holiday present for our nation, wouldn't it? Thank you for such an articulate response. I promised I'd try to sneak in one more question from employee colleagues. Please forgive me for those who we couldn't get to your question. This one is about New Year's. It says New Year's is only a few weeks away. Many people have resolutions that they adopt on New Year's. What is your New Year's Eve tradition, and do you make resolutions? Chris Holden.
Not so much resolutions, but goals. and maybe they're the same in some respects. But I try to, and we've actually on a policy side, we've already laid out our new bills that we're going to be moving forward on next year, and so we're really excited about that. And I've got great staff. I can't take credit for all the good work that comes out of our office because our staff just does an amazing job, and our district staff dealing with the challenges that community people are having on the ground. But I would actually, I guess what I'd like to see, and partly and tying into the earlier question, we're going to have redistrict maps. So the elections that members are going to be running in next year are going to be different than the ones that they ran in previously. And I think it's an opportunity to, as we engage with to some degree, new constituents, that we really listen. And when I say we, all of us who are in a position to make decisions around things, that we're not just going in with sort of a locked in thought process, that we give ourselves capacity to hear new ideas, new challenges to the way we've addressed some of the problems that we've dealt with, and really be, as I said earlier, the one word that is an important skill is just to start showing kindness in the policy arena. And maybe that helps us in terms of being able to show that we can rise above pettiness, we can rise above divisiveness, and rise above sort of I'm in the blue camp, I'm in the red camp, but just find the right camp to be in that really does the most to impact the greatest number of lives, not only in this state, which is the 5th largest economy in the world. So we really do have an opportunity to do some big things in California. And I think that climate change is going to be one where we can continue to show the rest of the world that we're ahead of the curve, and we really are prepared to take the reins and lead forward in a positive way to get there. But we're going to need everybody to join in. And but I think it's a leadership role we can take on and exploit.
Sounds like a great New Year's goal. KR Sridhar, how do you spend New Year's Eve, and do you make resolutions?
Well, I'm definitely making some strong resolutions for Bloom family for 2022. And I'm super excited because we are in the right place where, like with, when we had COVID, we empowered ourselves to go help instead of feeling helpless by doing so many things. Whether it was ventilators, whether it was emergency power for hospitals, whether it's with testing. Similarly with climate, we are in the right place at the right time, where we can offer resilient microgrids, where we can offer biogas as a means of carbon reduction, where we can offer hydrogen solutions to people, where we can offer carbon capture. And 2022, my resolution should be the year of partnerships. We go find both commercial and community partnerships, along with public partnerships, to take this forward in a very big way and really make an impact.
Good. Well said, KR Sridhar. We like to close out our Empowered Community Employee Town Halls by hearing from two leaders within our company, always different leaders, with what they take as takeaways or nuggets from these conversations, taking no more than 45 seconds each. We'll go in alphabetical order because we love all of our colleagues equally. Chris Ball, if you could take yourself off of mute and turn off your camera. What is the 1 or 2 nuggets that you would take away from today's discussion?
Thank you, Carl. My name is Chris Ball. I have the distinct pleasure of discussing Bloom's technology and the value that we bring to our customers and our communities. And what I took away from today's discussion is that we need to continue having this public-private sector partnership, collaboration, and most importantly, education. So Assembly Member Holden mentioned a few key themes: air quality, power reliability, clean energy with a focus on climate leadership, cost-effective electricity, and water usage. And if you're obsessed with our technology as I am, you know that these are all things that Bloom can deliver to communities. So we need to continue having these public-private sector conversations to, allow people to know that the technology exists and the public will is there. And if we can come together, we can solve a lot of these challenges that we're trying to figure out.
Chris Ball, excellent. Thank you for sharing those nuggets. And next, from our Chief People Officer and Executive Vice President, Sonia Wilkerson. Sonia, nuggets from today's discussion?
Yes, many nuggets from today's discussion. And by the way, many thanks to both of you for your very innovative and passionate comments. The key takeaways for me today is that first of all, I'd like to thank you for your passion around not forgetting the underserved communities when it comes to resiliency and power reliability. And it's so important because these communities are often forgotten. And the partnership between, as Chris said, industry and government is absolutely critical. And Assemblyman Holden, thank you so much for driving the air quality initiatives in the best way that you can in a very turbulent political arena in which we see on our side of the table. Another key takeaway, which I won't forget, is taking care of people and having kindness as a part of the formula and bringing resolutions from a clean air perspective into the broader community. And Bloom is playing a very large role in driving the innovation to make that happen. So again, thank you for your passion and your drive. We need it.
Sonia Wilkerson, thank you. Assembly Member Chris Holden, Dr. KR Sridhar, and to our Bloom Energy colleagues, thank you for such an inspiring and impactful employee town hall today. Wishing you all the best during this holiday season. Thank you for your servant leadership. And with that, we will close out our December Empowered Community Employee Town Hall. Thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.